Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
And the eyes on the Hawks are going and looking at Nashville in a game that we were supposed to get 4 years ago. We'll take it now in 2024. Welcome to this Sunday edition of Eye on the Hawks. As the Hawks get ready for the Music City Bowl against Missouri, that is coming up on December 30th, 1:30 p.m. kickoff at Nissan Stadium. Mitch Ficko and Sebring, Mike Howell here to break down what we're learning about the Tigers, 9-3 out of the SEC in that matchup that's coming in 22 very short days for the Black and Gold, 8-4, looking for a 9th win, and Kirk Ferentz would tie Woody Hayes with 205 wins in the Big Ten if they get that win. Initial reactions to this selection as Jay Higgins stands over Broadway there.
Well, you want my honest reactions? Are we?
No, we want your dishonest one.
Lie to
Well, I don't know. If
Owen wanted to go to Tampa.
I don't know if the JCs of the city of Nashville are going to want to listen to this portion of the podcast. Here's the good news. The good news is that we're not Nebraska, and that we're not a bottom 3 least desirable state in America, and we don't have to go to the Pinstripe Bowl. That's the good news. The bad news is we're going back to Nashville. With all due respect to the city of Nashville, which is a fine city, and
I like Nashville a lot.
I'd love to live in Nashville one day. It's a great city across the board, but in terms of bowl game travel, here's the thing. Like, I know that there are rules against playing in back-to-back bowl games for certain bowls, but it's like, if you have one of the bowl games that nobody really wants to play in, you should have to go like 3 years between picking a team, a game that a team's going to have to go to. I just feel like this is a game that so few people are going to be excited about in terms of the fan base. Just like, all right, we're going to a drivable town again that's going to be mildly warmer than the state of Iowa. We were just there 2 years ago. It's Nashville again, fine. At least when they were playing in the Outback Bowl every other year, it's like, well, at least we get a trip to Florida out of it. But going back to Nashville just does not get my juices flowing all that much, to be quite frank. I know, Mike, you were there by my side a couple years ago when we went to Nashville for this same Music City Bowl. But do you have a different perspective?
I half understand what you're saying, and I think a lot of fans will do the same. I've already have friends that have ties to Nashville who said I'm not going. It's on a Monday too at 1:30, which is a tough. It is the only college football game on that day.
Is that right?
I believe, at least according to the ESPN schedule. So, but in the middle of the day on a Monday, on not a holiday, it's the day before a holiday. At least, well, in some work spots, it's going to be tough to go to. I really like Nashville though, so if I get to go with you, we'll have to finalize those plans. I'm excited for it. The bowl game itself against Missouri, I was kind of nervous that I was going to play Ole Miss. And depending on how many opt-outs they were going to have, I thought that could have been a chance where we'd have a repeat of last year, where it's not even close. Missouri's still ranked pretty high, at least I think they're like 19th or something right now. So I think it could be a little closer game than what we could have saw from maybe a higher ranked SEC team. So I think Alabama getting knocked out of the CFP maybe rearrange some things. So I guess I'm not like superly excited, but I'm not as down as you are.
Yeah, you just want to go to Orlando. You don't have to go.
Hey, can I get the Iowa State beat? I'll go down to the Pop-Tarts Bowl. You kidding me?
There you go. All right.
Let's do it.
Again, mass apologies to the Nashville Chamber of Commerce for my colleagues' comments. It's friggin' Nashville. Who doesn't want to go to Nashville? Oh, yeah. I guess we got to go to Nashville.
If we just weren't there 2 years ago, I'd be a little bit more jazzed about it, but it's just like,
I went there 4 years ago, and I'm dying to go back for 4 years.
It's just, it's the same thing.
I have heard from multiple people who are like, hell yeah, let's go back to Nashville. Like, that's great. Like, you get a long weekend there. Yeah, you got to be on a Monday. All right, whatever. It's the holiday stretch. I think there will be a great Iowa contingent there. I think I'd be interested to see what the Mizzou contingent will be like. I don't really know a whole lot about them. I was at the game that Iowa last played in a bowl game against Mizzou. That was the 2010 Insight Bowl down in Arizona, and there was a great Hawkeye contingent there. It was not a particularly warm night in Arizona. It wasn't like South Beach earlier in 2010, but it's a Hawkeye bowl game. Folks are going to travel. It's Nashville.
I do wonder though if like once we get into the thick of this college football playoff. Just I know Kirk made a comment about sneering at it, a meaningless bowl game, and while I do think for players on the team they get extra practices, that totally is not meaningless. But for a fan's perspective, like, are you going to shell out money to go to a bowl game that like you said, you went to 2 years ago? I don't know if that's going to be the case moving forward in this landscape. When you look at teams like, especially like Alabama and Michigan, like honestly, who's going to go to that bowl game? A team that just won the national title against Alabama who got snubbed out. Like that's why I thought Iowa was going to go there, because at least Tampa, I think you get to go to the some of the beaches. So I do wonder, just in general in the landscape of things, like how many people are going to get excited about going to these bowl games that aren't the CFP.
I don't know. Folks didn't have to go to, I'm sure they would have loved to be in Indy yesterday. That's not a trip fans had to plan. So now your only trip, just like in 22, is, all right, let's go to Nashville for a long way. I think there will be a good contingent there. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there always is. I feel like even if it was the Pinstripe Bowl, you'd probably have a pretty solid Hawkeye contingent making the trip out to NYC. That might even be a little more fun just because, again, it's something new and different. The difference in driving time between Iowa City, Nashville versus Columbia, Missouri, and Nashville is about 2.5 hours. It's about a 6-hour drive from Columbia to Nashville. It's 8.5 to 9 hours from here to get to Nashville.
Eli Drinkowitz, your head coach at Mizzou. He and Kirk have never met, according to Kirk, but Kirk's got thoughts on him and what he's done there in Columbia with the Tigers.
Tremendous respect for what he's done. And I don't know a lot about him, quite frankly. His background, I know he was at Appy State, an outstanding program, and did a really nice job there. So, Missouri certainly did a good job of identifying him. And the job he's done there in short time, I'm old. I consider 5 years short time. So he's really done a really nice job, not only building a good program, but it's a national program. And they've done very well in a tough conference, as you know. So, congratulations to them. I know it's going to be a tough opponent for us to match up against.
Yeah, they were a highly thought of team coming into the year. Mizzou was Brady Cook back at quarterback, Luther Burden, the wide receiver, who has opted out. He's off to the NFL, so maybe that evens things out. Caleb Johnson opting out of the bowl game, and Luther Burden, who was an All-American last year for the Tigers in 2023, opting out. Middle of the road in terms of offensive ranks, pretty much across the board for the Tigers. 24 sacks allowed, one of Iowa's strengths. They've had 27 sacks on the defensive side. 26 sacks on defense, too, for Mizzou, though. So they're a team that can get the quarterback as well. Iowa, though, as we've talked about throughout the year, pretty good at protecting their quarterback, just 15 sacks allowed. Turnover margin has been a big stat for Iowa, plus 13 this year. They were minus 7 last year. Huge improvement in getting to the top 10, 15 in the country there. Mizzou is 26 in the country in turnover margin. They're plus 7. They've only turned it over 9 times on offense. We talked about Iowa doing a pretty good job protecting the football. 11 turnovers this year. 3 of those against UCLA. 3 of them in the third quarter against Ohio State. Otherwise, Iowa's done a pretty darn good job protecting the football. Just 9 turnovers all season, though, for the Mizzou offense. So, again, what do we think about not Nashville, Tennessee, which is a lovely city that people are going to be looking forward to going to, but just Mizzou, what we know about them from this year, and certainly different from the team that was supposed to play Iowa in the Music City Bowl 4 years ago before that got wiped out from positive COVID tests on the Tigers side. But what do we think about, what do we know about Mizzou so far?
It's an interesting lineup across the board when you look at the SEC's bowl game matchups that they have. It almost feels like, some people are saying that they're almost like stacking the, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Like stacking the deck against their opponents in some of these bowl games, because not necessarily in this one, but other ones where it's like, Alabama, Michigan feels like it's a a bit outmatched. And some of the other ones seem
South Carolina, Illinois.
South Carolina, Illinois, they're kind of
Florida plays Tulane.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Tulane is a decent team, but they lost to Oklahoma, who's a middle 6-6 team,
So there's a lot of people thinking that SEC just wants to kind of stack the deck so they can say in the offseason, oh, look at, our bowl record was so much better than all these other teams. But this is a legitimate game that could be pretty interesting in terms of what the SEC could produce in the offseason or what they might have to talk about, just because we've got opt-outs coming just across the board in the SEC. I feel like that's like opt-out central when it comes to guys who are going to leave early and go to the NFL. So we saw it a couple years ago when it was Iowa against Kentucky in the Music City Bowl. Will Levis had opted out of that game, and they ended up having to play against. Did Deuce Hogan start that game?
Deuce Hogan played way late.
He played in the game but didn't start it.
Yeah, Levis started, played most of it.
Oh, Levis was the one who played in that game?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about for Iowa. Duh, he was on Kentucky. No, it was, I can't remember his name. It wasn't, he didn't start, though.
Yeah, Levis had opted out, I think, and so didn't get.
Levis played against Iowa, though, in the 21 Citrus Bowl. Yeah.
So I don't know much about Mizzou, but I could see this being a game that, as we've talked about in a lot of these years, where Iowa just comes in with a little bit more to prove, more to play for, more that they're wanting. They just seem to take a different approach to the bowl game season than a lot of the SEC teams do.
Yeah, and it's always weird for these kind of games, especially like an hour after you find out, like Brady Cook's a senior, he's a really good quarterback. Does he play? Or I don't know what his NFL draft prospects look like.
Former Notre Dame and Arizona State quarterback there as well.
He's their backup. So, just like last year, and last year's different because Tennessee had Nico, who was the heir in waiting, and has played really well this year, and he showed how good he is. So I think it has I think Iowa could win this game, obviously, like they're in this bowl game, but what team from Mizzou shows up? How many opt-outs do they have on the defense and on the offense? We already saw their best players out. Iowa's best players out too. Caleb Johnson won't play. It's just one of those interesting things that we have to wait and see, like who's going to be available. Maybe a couple weeks, at least this week with the transfer portal open up tomorrow.
Weirdly, this will be the second time this year that I'll have seen Mizzou play in person. A couple months ago, I went down to see a friend in College Station, and A&M was hosting Mizzou that day, and they just got absolutely wrecked by A&M. That was a game where Mizzou came in ranked. I think they were a top 10 team at the time. They might have been undefeated at the time, and A&M just came out and just absolutely took them to the woodshed. So anyway, but they did not, for my one time seeing them, they looked incredibly unmotivated in that game at Kyle Field that day. So we'll see if I watch Tigers go 0-2 in person.
Most of the season, when you look at their schedule, they didn't really perform well on the road. They got blasted by AM on the road, 34-0 against Alabama on the road, until that South Carolina game, which was one of their last ones. They had a lead. They were down by 2 or 3 scores, came back and took the lead, only for Sellers in South Carolina to win on a last-second a touchdown. But when you look at it, I feel like this is so true to everyone outside the top 10 in college football. You look at their schedule, be like, well, who's their best win, right? You look down their schedule. Is it Auburn 21-17? I doubt it. Is it Vandy 30-27? Or is it Boston College, who's 7-5 and going to play? So all the teams that they played that were good, they've lost to, but you could say the same thing, for Iowa.
Who's Iowa's best win?
Yeah, it's probably, looking back at it, either Washington or Minnesota, actually. Probably Minnesota.
Their best win,
on the road against Minnesota.
Yeah, probably so.
It's a great one. Yeah. So no Caleb Johnson. So this means Kamari Moulton and Jazz Patterson going to take over in the backfield. We're hit a couple topics quick here. Combined for 612 yards, 4 touchdowns in 2024. Kamari with 70 carries, 377, 2 scores. Had that big 68-yarder against Maryland after the fumble. Jazz, 54 carries, 235, 2 touchdowns, along of 39. And it sounds like, according to Kirk Ferentz, who we just talked to in the last hour or so, Xavier Williams, Brevin Dahl, a couple true freshmen, look like they're probably in the mix to shore up the running back up by committee approach that we're expecting on the 30th against Mizzou. Just initial thoughts about Kamari getting a chance and Jazz getting a chance, maybe a couple fresh faces making their debuts in the bowl.
Go ahead, Mike.
I would love to see Brevin Dahl and Xavier Williams get tote the rock. We've seen this a lot in Iowa bowl games. I think Coker got his first. Was it against Mizzou?
Well, he had been playing the second half of that.
Yeah, that was kind of his breakout game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he went crazy. He was offensive player of the game in that. It's one of my favorite bowl moments is, and I just shared the highlights from that Inside Bowl on Twitter. His second touchdown run, the big long run where Marvin McNutt comes from across the field and just decks a receiver on a block. You hear somebody go, uh-oh, as he starts that run off my nap mic. That's Michael Strahan, who was there to do a Subway promotion at halftime of the Inside Bowl. He was standing right next to me when he broke that. So that's one of my favorite little inside baseball moments of things I've shot, particularly at bowl games. Michael Strahan was impressed with Marcus Coker that night. Yeah, there you go. So
this your footage, Mitch?
This is mine. Here's some inside baseball. This was a drive to Omaha in a snowstorm on Christmas morning to fly out to Tempe. That was my glamorous bowl travel, and that was back when we were still shooting on DVC Pro tapes, which, if If you know anything about DVC Pro Tapes, the laptop editor, laptop put it in quotes for those watching on YouTube, because that is an editor that basically goes in a plutonium case, and you have to drag that around with a tripod and a gear bag and a big old camera. And that's your first bowl trip in 2010, trying to go through the Omaha airport at 5:30 in the morning on Christmas Day. Great memories, but a heck of a win. One of the more underrated bowl wins, I believe, for Iowa. Brett Greenwood, they're making a great play.
When you just look at some of the players in this, like Adrian Claiborne and Tyler Sash.
Blaine Gabbert, quarterback, trying to find TJ Moe, who I think had like 12 catches.
Micah Hyde, just signed with the Bills again.
Yeah, awesome to see that. Blaine Gabbert's brother, Brett Gabbert, just started for Miami, Ohio in the MAC championship game yesterday. Might remember Brett's first start ever at Miami, Ohio, the 2019 opener against Iowa. Kid's still playing. Micah Hyde. That's an all-time Micah Hyde moment that maybe gets lost in the shuffle.
A lot of similarities between this team and that team. A lot of players coming back from a team that did, won 10 games and then, didn't have quite the season that you thought they would. They didn't really compete for that conference title. And this year there was a lot of one-score losses that, they were just as talented because Mizzou was ranked 13th in this game. So, you wonder if Iowa can do it this year and end on a high note with getting a ranked win.
Ricky Stanzi had a very 2024 Iowa stat line in that game. 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 200 passing yards. Yeah,
he had a big play to McNutt. I think you saw at the beginning there. And Ricky that's maybe the best all-around season an Iowa quarterback's had in the last 10, 15 years. He was outstanding that year and got drafted because of it. So, yeah, little throwback there. Speaking of quarterbacks, though, Brennan Sullivan, by all accounts, set to return. Almost 500 total yards, the 6 total touchdowns. Started as the red zone QB, ended up being QB1, and then did that ankle at UCLA. Kirk telling us today, basically, it'll probably be him starting, but he's going to use the next 3 weeks to say, hey, you, Jackson, go chase it and go compete. What do you guys think about Brendan coming back and what that could mean for his status in 25, or if what Jackson could do, or what do we think about quarterbacks coming into this game?
I just really like the backfield as a whole, kind of to touch on the running backs and the quarterback situation. I mean, call me crazy. I'm a big fan of seeing Brendan be the day one starter in 2025. I like what he brought to the table. Boy, when he was healthy, the 2 games that he started and played the full thing, he was awesome. And, it was really fun football to watch. The Wisconsin, the Washington games, right? Those were his 2 games where he started and played the whole thing, I'm pretty sure.
No, not Washington.
Northwestern?
Wisconsin.
He came in against Northwestern, started against Wisconsin,
and then he
started against UCLA.
Okay.
Got hurt real bad.
So he only started and played 1 full game then?
Yeah.
Interesting. Regardless, the games where he was in there for the majority of the time, boy, it was fun watching him play. Seems like the offense was having a lot of fun out there. I like the offense getting built around him for next season, and so I'm excited to see what he could bring in this bowl game if he's back to full health again, getting ready for next year with a backfield that could feature, again, a 2-headed monster in Kamari Moulton and Jazz Patterson. Kamari is a guy who is going to be coming into year 3 next year. Kirk Ferentz always talking about the year 3 guys. That's kind of their breakout time. So this bowl game could be a chance where we're seeing what Kamari could do if he is the number 1 guy coming next season. I like this offense for the bowl game.
Yeah, I like Sullivan going in. You saw how limited Iowa was against Nebraska when teams just try and stack the box against Caleb. Caleb's also gone for the bowl game too. But you saw the offense works, but this year's offense works a lot better with him at the helm than it does with, a 5th string, 4th string, whatever guy who was 3rd or 4th string.
Offenses you would expect.
On Colorado State last year. I slightly disagree with you next year. I think you got to bring a quarterback in. At least you have to try.
To compete for the starting job?
100%, because I think Tim Lester wants more of a passer, and you saw how dangerous it is when you have a guy running like Brendan Sullivan. His 2nd game, he's knocked out. And if he's not going to slide and get out of bounds and do stuff that, other scrambling quarterbacks who have longer shelf lives do. So I think, Brendan should be in the competition, but you have to get a guy who can throw the ball and sling it around, and whether that's, whoever's in the portal now or someone that's going to enter, tomorrow or this week. I have no clue who would be interested or who is interested and whatnot. So, but I do like personally looking at a guy who's, kind of like Curtis Rourke, who's in a lower G5 or maybe even FCS, just a winner who knows how to throw the ball, because I think that's the kind of offense that Lester at some point wants. I don't think he wants a guy who's going to put his body on the line. And that passing game, at least from Sullivan, was shaky against UCLA and Wisconsin.
It's going to be a very interesting scenario. Iowa, it didn't play out the way they were hoping, certainly this year with quarterbacks. There was a novelty this year in having a guy like Cade McNamara there, a very established starter, and you're able to bring in the later portal a guy who has started and won other Big Ten games. That's not. I don't see that being a case, particularly for a program like Iowa in terms of what they've done on offense recently and maybe what they have with NIL. To have a guy who started games and then go out into the portal this week or whenever it may be and bring in another guy, particularly the names that have been thrown around, I think it'd be very tough to keep two quarterbacks like that. Brendan Sullivan might not just be playing for being the starting quarterback at Iowa, specifically in 2025, in this game and whatever.
That's interesting. Yeah, he might be auditioning.
I think that's how everybody is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Pretty much.
It's wide open.
I think in this day and age, you need a difference maker at quarterback if you really want to contend for conference titles. And this year, Iowa just didn't have one.
Yeah.
So who can you get? There's going to be a lot of quarterbacks. I've already seen like a ton of them, even that, not UNLV, who was it? Oh, the Miami, no, not the Miami guy. I'm forgetting who it is, but someone just entered this morning who's a low tier guy. But
Tulane's QB in the last half hour entered the transfer
that
portal.
might be who I'm thinking of.
Darian Mensah.
Yeah.
I think, this last year the conversation was around, boy, if Iowa's offense can just get into the top half, the top 80 of college football offense, that's going to be a big step in the right direction. I feel like if Iowa can have, not to look too much into next year because we're kind of talking bowl game today, but if they can have a quarterback who's like the top 8 in the conference, I think they're a team that could compete for a Big Ten title. Do you think Brendan Sullivan could be a top 8 quarterback in the Big Ten? I think he could, but do you want to start over again? Brendan's a guy that at least is familiar with the system. Do you want to start fresh and again bring in another guy who's got to learn the whole system and is going to start raw again next year?
Yeah, I mean, if he's a difference maker,
yeah.
I think the coach will feel fine. I think this day and age, you don't need a guy to be there multiple years. You look around the, Will Howard at Ohio State was his first year, Cam Ward, and these are top-end transfers, so I don't think Kyle McCord at Syracuse, what he did there in that system was really impressive. Heck, UNLV's starting quarterback transferred after 2 games, and that they still are a top 25 team because I'm blanking on the quarterback's name, but he played really well. It's just such a difference maker, and when you don't have one there, we had the difference maker at running back, right? It's easier for defenses to say, we're going to take that away from you. But how that plays out, I'm not really sure. If they can't find the right guy, then at least you have Brendan Sullivan, who's been a starter and can win games.
Yeah. There are far worse consolation prizes, quote unquote, than a kid of Brendan's caliber who we saw coming against Northwestern and spark immediately, and before that the red zone packages. Yeah, we'd be fine with Brendan Sullivan, more than fine, I believe. Big test for this Iowa defense in their final game for the guys that came back. So many of them: Nick Jackson, Jay Higgins, Quinn Schulte, and all those 6-year guys who have been around a long time. Again, an Iowa defense that has learned how to turn the ball over real well after -7 turnover margin last year, +13 this year, one of the best in the conference. So what do we feel about them going up against, again, an offense that's not going to have burden, but they can score some points. They're middle of the road in a lot of categories, but they've played against SEC defenses, if you want to lean into that old standard of what there is in the Southeastern Conference. What do we think about this one final ride for a group of seniors that a lot of them, those 6-year guys, were at least on the roster in 2020 when they were supposed to play in Nashville against Mizzou. Maybe they get another chance to go back and do that.
Yeah, that they do have a great motivation and a lot of pride that they want to fight for in this game, just because it would be such a shame to see them get, Iowa's defense just got embarrassed in last year's bowl game against Tennessee. It was just, not what you expect to see out of an Iowa defense, a Phil Parker defense. And so you'd like to at least see this team in a game that's, again, grand scheme of things, not really a big deal, the Music City Bowl. But for these guys that are playing in their last game, Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson especially, Quinn Schulte, another one that's been around for so long, and a captain. Like, you want those guys to at least be able to go out on a high note, even if it's not a win, a game where at least they get a chance to show what they're worth versus what they played like in last year's game against an SEC opponent.
Yeah, Iowa's an interesting program because a lot, I think a majority of college football teams, a lot of their stars on defense who have NFL capabilities are going to opt out and say, and if they're not in the playoff, But Iowa's kind of that program that, yeah, Jamari's out, Caleb's out, but there aren't like a mass exodus like there are on some other programs. I still think it's going to be a difficult challenge. I mean, Luther Burden was hands down their best player, but he actually didn't lead the team in receiving. They have the Theo Weiss Jr., who had 200 more yards receiving than him, which is kind of crazy to think about because maybe he's just so much of a target. I didn't watch a lot of Mizzou. I watched some of that A&M game that you were at, but
really?
That was a total blowout.
Yeah.
It's still going to be a challenge, though, especially if Cook plays because he's an excellent quarterback, excellent college quarterback. It's going to give a lot of fits for Iowa, in the passing game at least, because you're still going to have a couple of younger corners, and you're missing Jamari. So
You've got the fifth-year guys on this team that have won now 42 games at Iowa. I think something like that. The sixth-year guys that we just mentioned, Sebastian Castro and Nick DeYoung among those as well, Kyler Fisher, have won 52 games at Iowa, have been part of teams that have won 52 games. Kirk at 204, going for 205 to tie Woody Hayes. You don't think those guys want to win 205 for KF before they ride off into the sunset? That's why I think another reason why fans might want to go there, and obviously they'll get a chance to hopefully see 206 in that opener. But boy, you get to go to Nashville and see history, see him tie one of the legendary names in the Big Ten Conference, not just for players but for fans too. What an opportunity that would be at the end of a 2024 season that didn't meet expectations, but you still got a chance at 9 wins. That's a heck of a story there.
Yeah, and I do hope that there is a good crowd there just, again, to send these guys off in style, and hopefully within driving distance that happens. I mean, I think I remember last year in that bowl game in Orlando, Iowa's fan base, they didn't have a great contingency there, I feel like. I mean, Tennessee totally outnumbered Iowa by leaps and bounds, and so I think this time around, if they have at least a more reasonable driving distance game, they can send Jay and Nick and those guys who have been around the program for so long out with at least something more memorable. And
there was no question these guys were going to play. Yeah. Remember the last Music City Bowl, Jack Campbell played in his last game, and it was the day his grandfather died. Yeah. He didn't know it at the time. They told him after the game, but just setting an example for like future Hawks, like those guys, like you knew Jay was going to play. There was going to be no doubt, and Nick and Jay are so close that those two were going to play for sure, and it would be great to get them out on a win, and 9 wins is so much better than 8. It's when you get to the 7, 8, and 9, obviously you want to win 10 games, but when you look back at it, I think 9-win seasons are looked at as, pretty damn good seasons. When you think about last one was, 19? A win against USC in the Holiday Bowl?
10-3 that year.
Oh, they did? Okay. So that was a regular season win.
Nate Stanley's 3 years, they went 8-5, finished that Pinstripe Bowl win, then went 9-4, finished with the Outback Bowl win against Mississippi State, and then in 2019 won that Holiday Bowl against USC to finish 10-3. So again, the last time Iowa's won 8 games has been 2022. They got that win in the Music City, and that Pinstripe win in 17.
You got to say that for as much as there are people who talk about Kirk's legacy in recent years and, kind of maybe coaching in a style that is a thing of the past. You do have to say that for him, that it's like with all of his, not all of course, not 100%, but so many of his star players that are going to be playing at the next level, there's still like no doubt that they're coming back for the bowl game. Like they love playing for this guy. They don't want to end their careers under him early. They love coming back, and they're not going to miss out on a chance to play just one more game for him.
Well, speaking of Kirk and getting guys to play one more game or one more season, transfer portal does open tomorrow, and Kirk was asked today just about the mindset going into that, how you evaluate pieces while you're also bowl prepping and all this stuff. So here's a minute from Kirk about his expectations and what I was looking for as they go into the next week or so of the portal.
Yeah, we'll know what's real, what really is available. I'm guessing, every area that you're concerned about or interested in, things will look a little different at those positions than they did a week ago. And then, but the bottom line still is there's got to be mutual interest. And, let's say there's a player we're interested, I doubt we'll be the only people that are interested with him. So you're going to have to compete for, in that regard. But it's kind of like anything else. We are what we are. And if it is attractive to a prospect and attractive enough for him to come and take a look and get a better feel for things, and that's good. And if not, we'll move on and find some guys that are interested. So I think we have a good idea where we'd like to fortify our team as a staff. I think we're pretty much on the same page there, but we don't want to reach for people either. So we're not going to fill a spot or fill what we think might be a perceived need just to fill it with somebody we're not excited about. It's got to be something both you feel good about on all ends. Obviously, the prospect has to feel the same way.
And Kirk says he's not expecting, says basically the roster is settled going into the bowl game. Again, Cole Marsh, former Waverly Shell Rock standout, just announced in the last hour or so. He's going into the portal. But other than that, Jamari Harris has been hurt, is going out. It sounds like you've got Cade McNamara, who's already off the roster, along with Johnny Pascuzzi's in the transfer portal. Caleb's opted out. Rusty Van Wetzinga is out of there as well, along with James Rezar. So it sounds like the expectation is you're not going to have many other guys out there. Who's coming in? Well, that's going to be a fun thing to watch in the next week or so.
Sure. Any of those surprises that landed in the portal for you? I think that Rusty Van Wetzinga maybe was the biggest surprise for me. Not that we've seen a lot of him on the field, but just his younger brother is such a star recruit, and he's going to be coming into the program. You'd think he'd want to stick around to play with him, but Rusty pursuing something else elsewhere.
Well, and he's a walk-on too, right? Yeah, I mean,
And a fullback, right? Which is
there's
looks
not a lot
like
of fullback, but there's also there's some tough conversations with walk-ons going on this week, as Kirk alluded to, of just figuring out where guys are and having to be brutally honest about something that Iowa's built a foundation on under Kirk, of having these great walk-on stories. They just had the presser on Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever it was, for signing day, and you only have 2 preferred walk-ons in that whole class when normally you'd have 5 to 6 times that. So it didn't surprise me a ton. If you told me a year ago with Iowa's offense of fullbacks going to the portal, what are we doing? But that's just how it's going to be. And there was more value in a guy like Hayden, our boy Hayden Large, who is more of a tight end, H-back hybrid type thing. I think that lends itself a little more than your traditional fullback, which is unfortunate if you're a fan of the glory days of Iowa's fullbacks, because they've had some great ones down the years.
And I saw this morning Aiden Price, a redshirt freshman receiver from Valley, at the transfer portal. I'm not sure if he's a walk-on or a scholarship guy. I hadn't heard his name before, so but he's also in there. But it's just you have to get down to that roster limit. So I think they are having those tough discussions, which kind of sucks. But it doesn't, because these kids can go and put their name in the transfer portal, go to a school, and that fits them, that wants them, and maybe get a little more action than they would have on the roster. So while that roster limit for next year kind of does change things, I wonder if it will be good for the long run for some guys some walk-ons that weren't going to make it and had the hopes to go in there. I don't know. I think it's probably a negative, just because all the walk-on stories of Iowa, like that's not going to happen as much. We only had 2 walk-ons come in last week in signing day, and usually I think they said, Tyler Barnes said they had usually 10 to 12 a year, which that's going to be one of the main differences. So that kind of stinks in the changing landscape of college football.
Excited about Little Fitzgerald and our boy Race Heitman walking on, though. A couple stories that, Fitzgerald's a heck of a quarterback, and
if Race Heitman's your walk-on, boy, that's got a good chance for
an advantageous spot. For sure. Aiden Price was a walk-on from Valley there.
That's what I thought.
23 season. So, just something to keep in mind. And still more questions as we go into these 22 days of bowl prep. Not sure when we're going to get a chance to talk to the players. Maybe we'll get into a practice. I don't know. Imagine that. The world's our oyster. So we'll figure some stuff out.
I'll go real quick. One last question on the portal.
Yeah.
What do you think is the number one position target out there for next year?
For Iowa?
Yeah, for Iowa.
Quarterback.
That's what I think, too.
That's what it'll always be, right?
Yeah, until you can get
your guy.
Exactly. And Tim Lesser hasn't had a guy yet. I think this Jimmy Sullivan coming in, I don't think it was his recruit from the beginning, but they did talk a lot once he jumped on. So, I really want to see a Tim Lesser quarterback from the start, and we haven't seen that. But other than that, I guess, let me throw that out there. Other than that, because I think we all agree. I don't know if you agree, because you're high on Brendan Sullivan.
I guess I am high on Brendan Sullivan. I would have said they really want to probably make a splash at wide receiver, so they probably really target somebody there. And I think on defense, I think linebacker is a guy where they really want to try to find somebody who's got a little bit more experience, just because they're losing so much at linebacker after this year. They'd want to bring somebody in who has a lot more starting experience, maybe.
Antonio Thompson's back in the portal. Wonder if he comes back.
Yeah, hey.
D-line's another one where, like, the more the merrier.
We've got a kid, it sounds like Elliott, among others, Elliott Clough, have talked about a kid from CMU coming in and possibly visiting, a really good prospect, an all-MAC defensive lineman. And we saw Rusty Feth come in as an all-MAC offensive lineman, and that worked out pretty well. So I would say, their receiving core is so young that I don't think they need to make a big splash in receiving, because you got Gill back, you've got all these freshmen that got a lot of time. I think if you got it, bring in a Gill-esque product. Tania Davis's brother, also out of CMU, is in the portal. Heck of a receiver for the Chippewas there. So maybe it probably couldn't hurt to shore up linebacker. I think there's a lot of faith in Jaden Harrell and Jackson Rexroth and those younger guys, and the trio of freshmen that there are high expectations for. Those Williamsburg guys, we're putting a lot of faith in those Williamsburg guys. I think, quarterback is still going to be that's your one, and it'll be interesting to see. You don't even want, who would have thought Jackson Stratton in the portal 6 months ago was going to be one of the biggest impact guys of the year. It's going to be fun to just sit back and watch it happen. I don't envy the position for the coaches, though, of, hey, let's bowl prep. Hey, let's try to keep our own guys. Hey, let's go get other guys in the portal. That's it's a different level of exhaustion. So hopefully they stock up on coffee and sleep. That
Dylan Thieneman, as I say his name?
Purdue,
out of Purdue, would be an interesting, cash replacement, Like, you plug that guy in, he's a safety. Safety's not really a need position, but he is a pretty damn good football player, and I don't know, it's just a crapshoot of where these players want to go and what players Kirk wants to target, but I think he would be a good fit if they looked at him.
Mike is making this a very NSFW show today. I've heard 2 damn so far.
Oh, my
crap among crapshoot. Do you see any other positions that we didn't mention that would need a big, maybe O-line?
O-line, yeah. I think you can never have too many tackles, and those are typically the defensive linemen and the offensive linemen. Well, I guess I don't think offensive lineman is a very expensive position in the portal, but if there's a really good one, he's probably going to cost a lot of money. But I think with the players you're losing, because you're losing Jennings, right? You're losing.
Jennings could come back, I think.
Oh, he could?
I think he's got another year possibly.
I never know with all these COVID years.
Well, he didn't go out there on senior day, right?
Yeah, and he should be back for him and Reese Vanderzee are both, according to Kirk.
Logan Jones, Mason Richmond, Connor Colby are all gone. And
along with Nick DeYoung and Tyler Ellsbury.
Just when you're losing that much, I know there's some players they like Cade Pieper and blanking on some other, but when you lose 3 or 4 guys who are integral to the offensive line, that's one that can help whatever quarterback is the starter next year.
Is there a guy from Alabama going into the portal, maybe?
Anyways, Connor Mobley, speaking of Southeast Polk, got in there for the Big 12 game, title game. Forgot for a minute he was there, but boy, Southeast Polk all over the place. All right, so when are we going to be back for your next Eye on the Hawks bowl game edition? I don't know. Just stick around. Stay on the social media channels, and we'll let you know, and we'll figure things out. One last thing from Mike.
Oh, and I got one this week for the Cyhawk basketball.
Oh, basketball, yeah.
But football, we'll let you know.
Hey, heck of a game in Ann Arbor. Learned a little bit about that men's team, for sure. And you learn
Michigan's good.
Michigan's a very good team, and then, hey,
Dusty May's a very good coach.
That game on the women's side against Tennessee was as good as advertised. You'd like to clean up the turnovers, but, boy, that's, again, that's learn a lot about these teams, even if they're not getting wins. And again, that's the first loss for Jan Jensen's squad. But yeah, it's gonna be fun to get into the basketball side of the pod. Excited to listen to those. All right, so we've got basketball coming up this week. Football ? Put a bookmark in it. We'll check back with you and get a little better idea of what we expect on the 30th next time around. For Mike and Owen, I'm Mitch. We'll see you next time on the football edition